All right, now we're going to work on section 1.2. And in section 1.2, we are going to learn about variables. We're going to learn about algebraic expressions and equations. And the first definition that you'll need to know is a variable. A variable, by definition, is a letter that represents a number. So a variable is a letter that represents a number. That number can be, or that letter can be a letter that where we can change the number. So it's like if you have X as your letter, and then you say, I want to figure out what happens when we have a letter X, and then we add 3. You can plug in a number for X, and then what you get is that number plus 3 gives you an answer. And so that's an example of a variable where we can change the number. The other way to, So that's an example of when we can use the variable to change a number. The other way you use variables is when a variable is unknown. And so suppose that you have a situation where you have a question mark number where when you add 3, you get 5. That question mark, which I'm now going to replace with a variable, x, is an unknown number. Some number plus 3 equals 5, and that number, as you might be able to see, is 2, because 2 plus 3 equals 5. So we have numbers where you can change, where you plug in a number for x and you get an answer, and then we have numbers that are unknown, where if you solve it correctly, you can figure out what x equals. Those are two different types of variables. All right, now let's talk about what an algebraic expression is. An algebraic expression is basically a sentence of math symbols. So like a sentence of English letters would create a readable sentence in a book. A math expression is like a readable math sentence. It has to be complete, and it can be made up of numbers, variables, and operations. Now, a math sentence is an umbrella term for a lot of things. So within a math sentence, and I'll draw my little umbrella here. Within a math sentence, you might have an equation or maybe you have something without an equal sign, which I'm just going to say is a statement. And so the algebraic expression is a broad term for whenever you have a math sentence with numbers, variables, and operations, which is like minus, plus, multiplying, divided by, or an equal sign. Those are all examples of operations. All right, lastly, among the terms that we need to learn from this chapter is an equation. An equation is, as I have spelled out here, a math sentence that connects expressions with an equal sign. And so an expression is numbers with operations, or variables and numbers with operations. And so we're thinking of two expressions that are connected with an equal sign, which, for example, might be x plus 2 equals 5 times 4. That is an example of an equation. And here's your clue that it's an equation. There's an equal sign in there. So let's do an example problem which you might have to deal with. Here we have a mathematical expression, 3 times x. And I want you to know that when there are multiple ways of saying you multiply two things. This is an example where you just have a 3 next to a letter. Another example is having a 3 with a dot and then the letter right next to that, so it's 3 times x. Another example is having 3 and then having 1. Either you could put the 3 or the x in a parentheses. And the last example is 3 with one of these asterisk marks x. The one we want to avoid, which you've probably used often in the past, is 3 with an x for multiplication and then an x for your variable. That is bad. We do not want that. We do not want an x for multiplication now that you're in algebra because we're using letters. Back to where I was before, we have 3 times x. 3 times x is 3 times some number. And suppose that I give you a table where I say x is the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. Your goal is to figure out when you plug in a number for x, what results. And so we're going to say the result is going to be, for now we're just going to write, result. And on this side of the column we're going to write result. And so when you plug in the 1, 3 times 1 is 3. When you plug in the 2, 3 times 2 is going to be 6. When you plug in the 3, 3 times 3 is going to be 9. When you plug in the 4, you get 12. There you have it. That is an example of a problem that you may deal with in this chapter where all you're doing is you're saying, if x is a number, what is the result when you multiply that number by 3? The next